In this Dragon's Dogma 2 video, I'm going to be showing you my Warfare build. This is kind of my go-to build for exploring out on the landscape. It allows a good mix of exploration and combat, and it's really, really strong, so let's get into it. So first up, let's get into the skills that we use for this build. One of them we use is rearmament, so we can swap back and forth between our magic bow and either our sorcerer's staff or our mage staff, depending on how you want to be set up, and I'll get into how you might set both of those up in just a second. And then the two magic archer skills that I'm using are Sagittate Avalanche and Ricochet Hunter. Sagittate Avalanche allows you to charge up a shot that shoots a lot of attacks in a row, and it does more damage than a regular attack significantly. But what I really love about it is its knockdown power. This skill has insane knockdown power, and we're kind of built around the knockdown power of this skill along with another skill. But it's really, really good for not only getting damage when you're hitting a weak point on like a dragon or something like that, or a cyclops, but also that knockdown power is huge, and it's not something that magic archers are really known for, so don't sleep on this skill. Ricochet Hunter is there because this thing is just a cave clearer. Anytime you go into a cave or a tight space, you should just be charging this up to full, firing it in blindly, and watching everything die. You pretty much, if you're not using this skill on a magic archer, you're pretty much wasting half the potential of magic archer. So make sure you have this skill. It will clear just about any cave in a few fires, and if it's a really long cave, then you just keep firing it as you move through the cave, and it just keeps wiping everything out. Now, if you're talking about getting max damage out of this build, which you really don't need to have, but you can, you're going to be using a sorcerer's staff, and you're going to be using Augural Flare. And what you're going to do is ideally throw this on the weak part of the enemy, then you're going to switch to your magic bow real quick with rearmament, and then charge up Sagittate Avalanche, and just unload into that spot for massive, massive damage. And something I want to mention about Augural Flare, though, is that when you throw it on, if you don't get an attack into it quickly, whether it's from yourself or from one of your pawns, it tends to vanish. So what you need to do when you throw it on and you switch weapons is you just need to get a couple arrows into it from your magic archer bow, and then charge up Sagittate Avalanche into it a few times. That seems to work the best. Or another strategy is knock the enemy down first with Sagittate Avalanche, and then throw it on, and then just shoot it in the head a million times until it explodes and dies. Either one of those are valid strategies, but if you're not careful and you swap too slowly and you sit there and you charge up Sagittate Avalanche, you might shoot into it and realize it disappeared and wondering what's going on. So make sure that you employ those strategies, or sometimes you might have a problem. So then the alternative to that is using a mage staff instead of a sorcerer's staff. You wouldn't use Augural Flare if you're doing that, but you might use something like Celerity instead to boost your speed. And what this skill does is it not only boosts your movement speed, which is great for exploration, but it also boosts the speed at which you charge your skills up and use your skills, etc. So these are going to be coming off much more quickly. You'll notice Sagittate Avalanche charges more quickly. Your regular, auto attack charges more quickly. This allows you to get these off faster so that you're getting out more damage regularly in combat. And it comes with the added benefit of being able to use Anodyne to top yourself off in between battles, or if you get in a bad situation. And the reason that I like Sorcerer or Mage in combination with Magic Archer for your Warfare setup is it allows you to use Levitate when you're out on the landscape. And this is a game changer. I've mentioned this in a few videos now, but it allows you to explore pretty much anywhere in the game. And once you have it, it's really hard to get rid of it. So what this build gives you in Warfare allows you to use the heaviest armor or most protection armor in the game, or any armor you want. If you just want to play fashion, you want to wear whatever pieces you want, you like the look of something, you can absolutely wear it with this build. It gives you very high damage. And it also allows you to explore every inch of the map, which you wouldn't do otherwise if you didn't have Levitate. So when it comes to equipment I'm using for this build, I'm using the Militant Dove and Anathema staffs. And the Anathema is not the best staff you can use for this build at this point. You can use the Lion Lord's Arch Staff and then upgrade to Caged Fury when you get to Endgame, and then swap to Dragon's Wit once you acquire that. Those are all viable options, but the reason I'm using Anathema is I didn't have to buy it, frankly. It saved me money at this point of the game. It's not that much worse than the Lion Lord's Arch Staff, and I'm not using it all the time. For instance, if you're using Augural Flare, you're only using it on the harder to kill enemies, and usually I'm just firing regularly, or using Sagittate Avalanche into medium enemies anyway. So it's not something I need all the time, so that's why I didn't get it. But if you're talking about min-maxing, you might want to go with Lion Lord's Arch Staff at this point in the game, and then when you get to endgame, upgrade it. And the reason that I'm using Militant Dove, which you can buy in Sacred Arbor, is because it has slightly less damage than Dragon's Breath, but it has more knockdown power. It has about 35 more knockdown power. And because Sagittate Avalanche does such good knockdown, I just kind of wanted to lean into that. And that's why I went with that bow. Eventually, you'll upgrade this to Blackwing Bow, or you'll upgrade it to the Grian and Mahar when you get to Endgame. Those both have higher knockdown and more damage. But if you're talking about maximizing your knockdown at this point in the game, that's what we're doing. And for upgrades on Anathema, you're going to want to go Elven, if possible, to further increase the magic stat, getting more damage out of it. But I like to go Dwarven on Militant Bow because the damage is slightly less than Elven, but you get even more knockdown out of this. And as I mentioned, we're leaning into those knockdowns, so Dwarven is really nice to have on Militant Bow, although it would seem like an unlikely pairing at first glance. And for rings, I'm using Ring of Quickening to increase my stamina recovery. You could actually use 2 of these if you want, but I also like to pair it with Ring of Triumph to give me extra health, extra stamina, and extra carry weight. All those things are just quality of life. I mean, you don't die as easily, you have more stamina for running and fighting in combat, and you can carry more stuff before you get heavier, which helps with stamina management, etc. So, just a really easy setup. I find that the rings that increase your damage, like when you're close to enemies, like Ring of Proximity, or the Ring of Skullduggery, like as you get behind enemies, are just not that useful in my opinion for boosting my damage. My damage is good enough already. So these quality of life things help me inside and outside of combat, and I like that. If you want to use other rings though, by all means go ahead. And for augments, my augment setup is detection. This eventually you will replace once you have like all the secret tokens. You can replace this if you want, but I have it here because I don't have them all yet. I'm using ambuscade to increase my damage against enemies that are basically not in combat yet, so like that lead off attack does extra damage. Find that I am always initiating combat, so I really like a little bit of damage boost there. Endurance is there to further increase stamina so that you have more in combat, you have more outside of combat when you're running. Both of those are good to have. Lethality further boosts the damage that you deal when you're targeting the weak spot of an enemy. We're doing that a lot in this build, so that's a no-brainer. Exaltation increases your stamina recovery by 10%. This is good both inside and outside of combat. I really like that, and athleticism reduces the cost to sprint around by 10%. And again, that's both good inside and outside of combat, and I really like having a build that's not only good at exploration, but is also good at combat so that you don't feel like you're sacrificing one for the other. So for my main pawn, I have a mage. I think mages are the best pawns in the game, frankly. They play the support role really well, but regardless of whether your main pawn is a mage or not, you probably will want a mage in your party. And the skills that I have on my mage are High Solemnity, High Celerity, Argent Succor, and High Halidom. So I have High Celerity there, as I mentioned earlier, to boost my speed. If you're using a magic staff and you want to slot it as one of your skills, you can replace this with something else on your mage, like, I don't know, a weapon buff, or you could replace it with an attack spell if you want, something like that. But because I don't have that and I'm using a sorcerer staff, I have that slotted here. I find this is better than a weapon buff usually, because I don't always want my damage type overridden by a weapon buff. Sometimes that makes the damage worse if the enemy is resistant to like maybe a ice affinity or fire affinity. Maybe it's worse for what you're fighting, but the speed is always good no matter what. Argent Succor is great for a spot heal in case you get yourself in a bad situation or one of your other pawns does. That's really nice. High Halidom is there to clear status effects from you. It's good if you get poisoned, various other status effects like sleep, you can get cleared really easily. I just like it on there for when you need it. And High Solemnity allows the mage to silence enemies. Like if you're fighting drakes and you're getting tired of their spells or some other hard to kill enemies, it can just silence them and prevent problems for you. And it's not always useful, but when it comes in handy, man, does it come in handy. So I really, really like that spell. Equipment wise for my mage, I have Legion's Might equipped. This is a really, really strong magic staff for a mage at this point of the game. It's probably the best one you can get at this point. And it also allows the pawn who equip it to revive themselves when rendered immobile. So that's really nice to have on your pawn. This applies only to pawns. So I feel like if you have a mage pawn, you definitely should equip this on them if you can. For headpiece here, I have Twilight Star, and this is basically, at this point of the game, the best in slot for a mage. So if you have Twilight Star from the Vocation Guild from Seeker's Tokens, highly recommended on your mage. And for body and legs, I have Charming Corset. I'll probably swap these out at endgame because this takes like both your legs and your chest slot, but it's really good at this point of the game. Very good on light armored characters because it definitely does about the same or more armor than like the lightest armor characters in the game. But if you're wearing like medium or heavy armor, then, you know, 2 pieces are probably better for you. And rings-wise on my pawn, I have Ring of Articulacy and Ring of Quickening. One boosts the stamina recovery, and the other reduces the cast time of spells. I find that pawns don't take advantage of quick casting, so reducing the cast speed of spells is actually nice on a pawn. That's why I have this one here. I don't like the other ring because it reduces the max health by 20%, and it isn't that much more effective, but I do like the increased cast speed. You could also put another Ring of Quickening here if you want. That would definitely help. So that's kind of my setup for my Warfare build. This is basically an all-around build that's good in combat. It's good outside of combat for stamina and management. It's good at exploration. It's really good at anything. And it's basically the build that's carried me through 50% or more of this game. Highly recommended if you're someone who isn't just all about the combat in this game and also likes exploration, but also wants to deal good damage in combat. Stay tuned, we have more build videos coming for EndGame. I wanted to get this one out today to kind of show you guys what I've been playing. But we will have other builds coming out for all the rest of the classes on exactly how to play them at endgame, what skills to use, what augments, etc. As always, if you have tips about Warfare, you can leave them in the comments below. And if you have questions as well, please leave them and I will try and answer them as soon as I can.